Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. We are joined now in studio by Senator Rand Paul. He's got a great book that is out tomorrow, I believe.
That's right.
Senator, you just came through some of the chaos going on in New York City. It's Columbus Day. There's a lot of different parades. But we were just talking, there's also a rally going on right now that is pro-Palestine, celebrating the terror attack that happened on Saturday and that continues to be going on in Israel right now. What were your thoughts, Senator, when you saw this news come out Saturday? How do you think the Biden administration has responded so far? How would you assess what you have been able to glean so far from this?
You know, it's kind of hard to imagine anybody who thinks that their political views are furthered by killing innocent women and children. Seeing those images over there, it loses any possible sympathy anybody could have for these people. And there are other complicated issues, but when you see young women who've been murdered and raped, and now people have been kidnapped, kids that have been taken, 260 kids. My kids have all gone to these music festivals over in the U.S. I can't imagine just somebody going through with automatic weapons, killing everybody there, innocent, unarmed people. And really, it's just, to me, it's despicable and evidence of just, cowardness. I mean, this isn't going into war and fighting for some cause you believe in. What kind of despicable person kills women and children and unarmed people? I mean, no sympathy at all from me, and I just don't see how anybody will give them any sympathy.
Senator Paul, to what degree do you think the U.S. May have a role to play in helping our ally Israel in dealing with Hamas?
Well, we've had a long-standing role with Israel. It goes back, 30, 50 years or more, and I think that continues. And I think when people start looking for things in the midst of a crisis, they're like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, we've already done lots for decades, and so I would venture to say that Israel is probably one of the most well-stocked munitions country in the world. I think they're adequately prepared for this. But I don't think it's sort of like, let's give them $20 billion or something. Let's give them $50 billion, because really it's about being smart about it. And in the end, they're already comparing this to 9/11. We were the best equipped military, the strongest soldiers, strongest army in the world, and we got attacked on 9/11. So it's going to be figuring out the vulnerability of what happened. People are already talking about where was the failure in intelligence. And I know we share a lot of intelligence with the Israelis. All of those things of cooperation I'm for. I just kind of hate it, as much as I have nothing but the utmost sympathy if everybody says, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What can we give them? Because we've bankrupted our damn country, giving it to everybody on the planet. And it's not that I don't have sympathy. I do. And I want to help, and I want to be helpful. But I hope it's not just sort of let's open the spigots and just, drain the coffers.
When you see that we, since 9/11, 22 years ago, some odd, have had the failure that we did, you just mentioned it, doesn't it just stagger you that over 1,000 terrorists could enter into Israel and rain holy hell down upon so many Israeli people, and that none of us saw this coming?
I guess the opposite surprises me. We have two big oceans, and we do have people within us that might infiltrate and cause a problem. They're right next to like 1 million people. I don't know how many people live in Gaza, but a lot of people live in Gaza on the Strip. They're right next to them all of the time. They're right next to the West Bank all the time. They're right next to 8 other countries they've been at various times at war with. So it actually, to me, is more surprising how good a job they do most of the time.
Yeah.
And that this is tragic and it's unusual, but it's like they live, and they will tell you this, when you visit Israel, they live amidst and in a dangerous world every day of their lives.
We're joined by Senator Rand Paul. He's in studio with Clay in New York City. I want to talk to him about his book, Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up, a topic that Clay and I are still very interested in, are not giving up as a subject matter that I know a lot of Democrats, a lot of Biden voters, and others don't really want to get to the answers here. Senator Paul certainly does. Talk to us first and foremost, Senator Paul, about, I know you get into this in the book, but the process that you went through to see that the COVID virus was, in fact, likely the product of gain-of-function research.
At first I sort of took the word of Fauci and others who said it came from animals. I knew that the first SARS virus had come from animals. They tested animals, civets, and they found antibodies and the virus in the animals. They tested the animal handlers, and they had antibodies. It all sort of fit together like a puzzle. But then this time they tested 80,000 animals from both the market and across China, and no animal had COVID. So they couldn't find an animal. They couldn't find humans that had it. Typically, if it's coming from animals, it has to try multiple times because it's adapted for animals, not for humans. So that it tries to infect a human, it infects Buck Sexton, but it's not very contagious, and it just dies in your body and it doesn't affect another person. It has to do this over and over until it gets lucky enough to mutate to be infectious in humans, not just in the animals. We didn't find any of that. With the first one, we did find that it was very sluggish. With COVID, we found that it hit humans and boom, 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 and infected everybody like that. And there was a doctor from MIT who wrote a book called Viral, Alina Chan, and in it she says that basically the virus looks like it was pre-adapted in a laboratory to become infectious. It didn't have to do the normal evolution in humans. It was already set to infect humans when it got to us.
We're talking to Senator Rand Paul. He's here in studio in New York. The book is Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up. I got an early copy of this book, and I just dove in. And so I'm encouraging all of you out there to go read this book. There were many things that because it was such a chaotic time, there were many things that I had forgotten about the March 2020 universe. For instance, that you got COVID super early, that everybody tried to blame you. You then started working in a local hospital to help COVID patients because you knew the impact of natural immunity, and there were so few people who'd already had it. Your wife went to the mail, and she got a letter that was addressed to your house that you were concerned was anthrax because it had a powder in it. I forgot about all that. And that everybody decided they wanted to mock you, including Stephen Colbert. I read through so much of this, and I just thought to myself, I can't even remember all of this happening. I just hit you with a lot of details. But take us back to March of 2020, some of the crazy things that happened to you and your family, including your son's coming back, I believe, from Duke and staying in the house. One of their foreign exchange, a kid, I think was from China, couldn't get back home. I mean, this was all chaotic and crazy.
So it's amazing that Twitter will take you down if you say that masks don't work or the vaccine isn't necessarily for kids or if COVID came from a lab. Twitter, Facebook will take you down. But if someone on Twitter says that they wish the guy who broke 6 of my ribs from attacking me from behind, punctured my lung, caused me to have part of my lung removed, doesn't that sound like it's inciting violence? Twitter didn't take any of that down. Then Stephen Colbert thought it was funny. And so what we got was a letter in the mail. Kelly, I was in Washington. She gets a letter in the mail and it has a picture of me with a broken neck and says, this is what needs to happen to you next. But then it's full of, she felt like sand or powder.
And your wife is in here right now. I mean, she just goes to the mailbox, and that's the level of anger and vituperative nature that you were dealing with.
Yeah, and most of Hollywood just thinks it's hilarious. They still think it's hilarious. They say, we wish his neighbor would come and finish the job. I was attacked from behind, broke 6 ribs, lungs filling up with fluid, had to have part of my lung taken out. I was sick. I was coughing up blood for a year and a half. I was sick for a long time, racked with pain, and they just think it's hilarious. And then what do they do to the right? They accuse us of somehow being insensitive, Trump of being insensitive, Trump supporters, and it's like, well, I almost died from an injury, and they think it's hilarious. And Stephen Colbert actually had some second-rate musician on there, both of them just guffawing about how hilarious it is that I was attacked and that somebody should come back and finish the job. So, no, I mean, between that and them accusing me of, swimming in the gym pool and trying to kill all these old senators and everything, and it's like, I came back and I said the right thing to do is I can help people. Even as a physician, it's going to be hard for me to make the decisions because I don't work in the hospital. But I said I'm willing to do what the nurses do and the orderlies do. If you have to rotate somebody, many of the people on the ventilator they found did better. None of them did great, but they did better if you rotated them onto their stomach and to their back. But if it's a big old guy in there and he's on the ventilator with the tube in his trachea, it takes like 6 people to do it. I figure, you know what? If I can go in the room, it's one less person, and I've already had it. I already have immunity. And not one person blinked an eye at the hospital. Not one of them said, oh, my goodness, you don't have immunity. Of course, this was before the vaccine, too. But nobody blinked an eye. Everybody assumed I had immunity until I got back to Washington, and I had all these snot-nosed 20-year-old reporters with 4 masks and goggles and all this stuff. They're not at risk for the disease. Look at the statistics, people. You're not at risk. But I had them saying, you don't know you have immunity. I said, well, you don't know I don't have immunity. It's like, what science courses did you take? What background do you have in science? And this is what we were riddled with was, young liberal reporters with not an ounce of scientific sense telling us that they knew what was right for us. And by golly, we better listen to them or they'll put us in jail.
Speaking to Senator Rand Paul, he is the author of a new book, Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up. Accountability for this, Senator Paul. The closest thing that I think we've gotten to accountability for all this is the number of times where you were able to grill Fauci and he was, Senator Paul, this is not personal. It's not about you and me. And, I represent science. That was about the extent of the accountability that we've seen so far. Do you think that there's a way we can get further than that? And it's not so much about, we need to punish people or lock people up or something, but can we at least get it on the record? I mean, even as of earlier this year, I remember I went to a hospital down here for routine, blood work in Miami, and they made me mask up.
Yeah, most people think that when you're trying to prove a cover-up that the other side will just deny. However, in this case, I think more thoroughly than I've ever seen, the debunking or the proof of the conspiracy, the proof of the cover-up are in the actual words of those who are covering up. It's all been gotten through federal court order, through Freedom of Information Act. We now have Fauci. You saw him in committee yelling and screaming at me, I have never funded gain-of-function research. I have unequivocally never funded gain-of-function research in China. We now have an email that he summarizes on February 1st of 2020 where he says, we're suspicious because the virus looks like it's been manipulated, but we're also doubly suspicious because we know they do gain-of-function research there. He doesn't say we fund it, but we know he funds it because we found the paper trail. So they funded this. It was dangerous. But then what we reveal in the book is it's worse than that. Not only did they know it, there was a committee set up to study the safety of these viruses. He purposely went around the committee. And he actually admitted this in the testimony when I cross-examined him. He said, all of my experts, dozens of them up and down, have looked at this and said there's no gain of function. Well, if that's true, where's the conversation? Who recorded these conversations, these deliberations? And that should have been the deliberations before the committee. But he didn't. He did an end run around the safety committee. And if we ever find the documents, which I'm sure they're still hiding, that has him signing off on they don't need any kind of scrutiny, it's not gain of function, then we have him dead to rights. It's probably making the worst scientific judgment, the worst medical decision maybe in modern history.
How far do you think this goes? Fauci, I think, if you look at the evidence, lied to you under oath. I mean, I think there's perjury there. Do you think this was a Fauci-originated lie, but based on his feeling like he was culpable, given American taxpayer dollars to Wuhan and all of those things? Or do you think this goes above Dr. Fauci, as you're now seeing reports about his relationship with the CIA potentially? Where does this all go in your mind?
I always thought Fauci was the top of the food chain and there wasn't anybody above him. But I'm starting to have a little bit of doubt that there is someone else or more than one other person. The reason is when you read the Slack email, the summary of the February 1st, 2020 conversation, he summarizes it in his words. And at that point, he doesn't have any bias against the lab leak, and he doesn't seem to have any bias that they're not doing a gain of function. He's not in cover-up mode yet. But somehow between February 1st and February 2nd or 3rd, something happens. So I'm trying to get his log for his visits to the CIA. I want to know if he met with anybody on February 2nd or 3rd. I also want his phone calls. Because if he went to the CIA, I want to know who it is at the CIA that's telling him, hold on here. We don't want the truth. It's more important that we have good relations with China. We have a lot of money going back and forth. A lot of people are getting rich in this stuff. We need to make sure that happens. And it's not the truth we care about. It's good relations with China that we care about. We do know that inspector generals have looked at the analyst in the CIA, and they came to the conclusion that they were suppressing any evidence that this came from the lab because they felt it was consistent with things Trump was saying. The hatred for Trump was such that they had to mark down the analysis because it looked like it might support his feelings or utterances saying that this was a Chinese virus.
Senator Rand Paul, everybody, go get a copy of his book, which is just out now, Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up. And Senator Paul, great to hang out with you. Well, Clay got to hang out with you. I got to talk to you. But thank you for coming on the show. And Mrs. Paul, our regards to you as well.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.